Sup, you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku Had the Powers of inFAMOUS. All he ever wanted was to be a hero. All he ever wanted was to save people. Well, be careful what you wish for Izuku Midoriya, because the universe just might grant it in the worst possible way. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Midoriya's apartment. Midoriya stood in front of the kettle, the water whistling with steam as he poured 2 drinks. "Tea's ready," he said to Tsuyu, who was sitting on the couch and watching TV with aimless eyes, just trying to keep her mind preoccupied. After her explanation, they had gone back inside Haruki's shop, with Tsuyu doing her best to wipe her tears away before Haruki and Mineta came back. They eventually did, and bought the clothes that would serve as their vigilante costumes. Once they had left, Mineta had been quick to ask what had happened, but Izuku told him in only the broadest sense, telling him that her parents had reacted badly to her sudden change and that she would be staying at his place for a while. At first, he thought Mineta would use the situation for some perverted joke, insinuating what they would do with them living together. But instead, he just nodded his head in understanding and told him if they needed anything to let him know. Now the two waited, doing what they could to pass the time before his mother got home. Picking up the cups, he sat next to Tsu and placed them down. The whole situation hung over them like a cloud. The only thing left for them to do was simply to wait and see. Like a terrible itch they could not scratch. "Thank you," she whispered to him as she reached out and took a sip. He hoped that its warmth would provide her with some comfort. She had suffered so much and had done so in silence, so much that he never could have imagined. A sting of self-hatred filled him. He promised. He swore that he wanted to take her pain away but could not even see what was in front of him. "How is it?" he asked her, running a tired hand over a tired face, everything that had happened leaving him more drained than his fight with Bakugo. "It's good," she told him, the answer lingering in the air before the silence returned, leaving only the ambient noise of the TV to fill the void. But soon the sound of a key entering a lock broke the silence as the two stared intently towards the door. The sound of creaking springs and jingling keys filled the home as the door swung wide open, his mother carrying groceries with her. "I'm home," she said loudly as she tried to take off her shoes, too preoccupied to notice the two of them looking at her. "Izuku, I've got something I need to," she tried to continue before she finally saw them. "Oh, hello, Tsuyu," she said quickly, dropping the groceries down and closing the door behind her, her eyes switching between the two of them and given their full attention. "Hello, Miss Midoriya, it's nice to see you again," Tsuyu said, a thin smile spreading on her face as a look of concern flashed over Inko's. "What's the matter? What happened?" she asked anxiously, catching on that something was wrong almost immediately. We were hoping that you'd let Tsuyu stay with us for a while," he told her, his eyes darting to Tsuyu as he saw her shoulders sag, her features pulled down by the weight of everything. "But why?" his mother asked. "Did something happen?" She continued, walking up to Tsuyu and asking her directly. It was then that a tear slid down Tsuyu's face as she explained broadly what had happened and why she couldn't go home. By the end, Inko's were watering as well, hand over her mouth in shock. "So can she?" Izuku attempted to ask before Inko's arms wrapped around Tsuyu into a tight hug. "Of course she can," she said as Tsuyu froze, eyes going wide as if it was the first time she'd been hugged by an adult in a long time. And with everything she had told him, he could imagine how long that was. "You can stay here as long as you like," she reassured her, tears flowing from her eyes in twin empathetic rivers. "You must be hungry. What's your favorite food?" she said, holding by the shoulders and smiling. Tsuyu looked to him and back to his mother, confusion and indecision on her face. She said, her mind stuttering and spinning in place. "Noodles," she eventually said, sound as unsure as she looked as her mother smiled with a brightness that hurt to look at. Moving past her, and with a look of resolution that he rarely saw in her eyes, she marched into the kitchen, the sound clattering pans and pouring water coming soon after. "I'll be done in about half an hour, so you just relax and get comfortable," she said over the sound cooking as Midoriya met Tsu's look of surprise with a small smile. In all honesty, he had always known his mother would have accepted. It was just how she always been, charitable to the nth degree. But even he was surprised by how right he had been as he lightly grabbed Tsuyu by the hand and led her back to the couch and sat back down. "I told you she'd let you stay," he told her as the corners of her mouth curled ever so slightly into the shape of a smile. The first smile he had seen on her face since their conversation in the alley. "Yeah, you did," she whispered as she went back to quietly sipping her tea. The two lapsed back into silence, letting the sound of the TV and the bubbling water fill the space. Before they knew it, his mother called out to tell them. "Food's ready," she told them as they got up and saw what had to be the best-looking noodles he had ever seen. His mother wasn't a bad cook by any stench, but he could tell she had put her game into this. "So how is it?" his mother asked as she took her first bite. "It's great," she said, licking stray butter from her lips, though the joy of her meal never reached her eyes, which always held a forlorn disposition. "So how's school so far?" she continued, technically asking both of them, but her eyes were focused squarely on Tsu. "It's okay," she told her, giving only the barest answer. But his mother persisted, asking if she had any classes she liked and other things about herself, careful to dance around any talk about her parents or siblings. Mom, maybe we should just let her eat," he told her, noticing that with each question the look in her eyes grew more distant, as if she were sinking into a pit. "You're right, I'm sorry Tsuyu, his mother tried to say before Tsu stood up and asked where the bathroom was, a tension in her voice as she struggled to keep it even. "Down the hall, first door on your right," she told her, her shoulders slacking and lips turning to frown as Tsuyu walked away. I didn't mean to," his mother said, unsure of what she did wrong. "It's okay, Mom, I'll go talk to her," he assured, giving a small, reassuring smile even as his mind became a storm. He could guess why she had reacted that way, the way her parents treated her, the difference between the two must have hurt. Slowly he came up to the door, and even from the other side he could hear Tsuyu's heavy stuttered breathing. "Tsu, are you okay?" he asked, and immediately wanted to smack himself. Of course she wasn't okay. No one would be okay after everything that had happened to her. "Can I come in?" he asked again, and in any other situation his face would have resembled a tomato to even think about going into the bathroom with a girl. The noise seemed to stop and worry raced up his spine before Tsuyu answered. "Okay," she said softly. Slowly Izuku turned the knob and opened the door and saw Tsuyu sitting on the edge of the bathtub, her eyes red and puffy again. "I'm sorry for acting like this," she sighed. "No, Tsu, don't apologize," he said, closing the door behind him and sitting beside her. "My mother was just trying to—" "I know," she said, cutting him off with a sad smile. "I know, your mother is such a kind person." "Tsuyu, listen," he told her, gently grasping her hand and interlocking his fingers with hers. "When I told you that I wanted to make your pain go away, I meant it. But for this, I don't exactly know how," he admitted as she rested her head on his shoulder. "This whole thing is so fucked," she chuckled, the fear, anger, and sadness dripping away into a reluctant acceptance of the absurd. "Yep," he agreed, nodding his own head as the chuckling eventually turned to laughter. They laughed and laughed at all of it until it eventually hurt to breathe. "You've done more than I could ask for," she whispered, the air in the room growing calmer bit by bit as she looked up at him, blue eyes staring at his own. "And I'm glad at least that you're here with me for all of this." Midoriya, taking the chance, kissed her, Tsu letting a small gasp before falling into it. It was not like their time in her room, long and passionate. It had been short and sweet, a dual reassurance of feelings. "You taste like a battery," she hummed. "You kiss batteries often?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Only the cute ones," she said with a smile, and for the first time since this one reached her eyes. "Come on, we should probably get out of here before my mother starts getting ideas," he said. Afraid of having that conversation, she giggled, face growing red as she did. "No, that will probably come right before we go to bed," he surmised, not looking forward to it in the slightest. Helping each other back up, and whipping away and last bits of tears from her cheeks, they walked back out and into the living room where his mother was eagerly waiting. "I'm sorry for my earlier behavior, Mrs. Midoriya," she said, bowing her head. "No, dear, you don't need to apologize," she insisted. "You've been through a lot." Tsuyu nodded her head, agreeing silently with the Midoriya matriarch as they went back to the table and finished their dinner. Overall, and in spite of everything, it ended up to be quite a nice experience, with Tsuyu seeming to be more relaxed. But eventually evening turned to night, and the issue of sleeping arrangements came to the forefront. His mother took Tsuyu into her room, talking about how she might still have some clothes that would fit her, seeing as how she wasn't in a position to get her own. It was only a few minutes before the two came back out, with Tsuyu wearing one of his mother's old shirts and a pair of sweatpants. "Doesn't she look nice?" his mother prodded, to which he quickly agreed. As Tsu's face gained a light shade of red, Inko walked over to the closet, pulling it open and rummaging inside until she pulled out a sleeping bag. "Good thing I kept this," she praised herself as she handed to Tsu. "Him and Mineta used to have sleepovers all the time. Why don't you go on ahead and make yourself comfortable?" she said to Tsu as a knowing look passed over the young girl's features before walking down the hall and into Izuku's room, leaving the mother and son alone. Mom, can we not have the… He tried to plead, face growing red with embarrassment. We are having the conversation, she cut in, putting a hand on her hip and a look that spelt a lecture. Mom, I am teenage boy with access to the internet. I already know how all of that works, he said, hoping to embarrass him mother with the revelation and get him out of this. Except all he received in return was a look that silently said, no shit. Izuku honey, you're best friends with Minoru, and though he's a good boy, he isn't exactly subtle with what he likes, or what he does in his free time. She told him, talking like it was the most obvious thing in the world, frankly. I would be more worried if you didn't know, but that's not what all this is about, she continued. I see the way you both look at each other, believe it or not, but I was young to once and I know young love when I see it. But she's been through a lot and now might not be. What you think we're just going to do that, the minute we're alone together, he asked, now being the one to cut her off. How do you think you came to be, she said to him, and his mouth hung open and he covered his face with a hand. Mom, he groaned as he felt his mother put something in his hand, something square-shaped. He looked down and nearly felt his eyes pop out of their sockets as he gazed at the condom in his palm. Mom, where the fudge did you get this? He whispered tensely, struggling not to curse. Well, I was going to tell you when I got home, but she said, giving him a look as he saved himself another lecture about language before walking back over to one of the bags she had been carrying, pulling out a lime green uniform with a smile. Since you're going to be off doing hero stuff and I didn't just want to sit around worrying all day and giving me any more gray hairs, I decided to get a job at the hospital. They give them out for free, she announced as Izuku's mind screeched to a halt, a lump in his throat forming as he remembered his conversation with Moya about the sickness that had already spread to multiple cities. But isn't it dangerous? I heard there's something back going around, he cautioned. Oh yeah, I saw it on the news, something about a bad flu season, but it's okay, Izuku. I only got a job as a receptionist, she told him, trying to assuage her son's worries. It did not. But Mom, I heard the flu was really bad this year, he tried to argue, the mental image of his mother being like one of those poor people in the alley feeling like ice in his veins. Don't worry, I'll be careful. Besides, think of it as me helping the people who gave me back my little boy, she said, raising a hand and lightly pinching his cheek. Now get going, she's probably waiting for you, she said as she walked into her room, getting in one last word before closing the door. But no grand kids yet. If it were possible for someone to die of embarrassment, he would already be in the ground. Rubbing a hand through his hair, he let out a long sigh. His mother had no idea what was really going on. And though Moya hadn't explicitly told him to not tell anyone, he was already taking a risk by telling his friends. All he could do was trust his mom to be as careful as she could. Walking to his room, he found Tsuyu waiting on the bed, sleeping bag rolled out beside it. So how was it, she teased with a grin, taking no small amount of pleasure at seeing him embarrassed. In response, he lifted his hand and showed the condom pinched between his fingers. He swore he never seen Tsuyu turn so red, doing her best interpretation of a tomato as her mouth hung open and her wide eyes darted from it to him and back again. Oh, she said, putting a hand over her mouth as she struggled not to laugh now. It was Midoriya's turn to become a tomato, as his embarrassment reached critical levels. Haha, laugh it up, he sighed, tossing the damn thing onto his desk and shut off the lights and casting the room in darkness. I mean, your mother's home, she said between breaths, pointing a finger to the door behind her, the distance between their rooms being less than 15 feet. What, does she have noise-canceling headphones? Izuku was glad for the darkness, because the look on his face at the admission that his mother would even need those. Oh okay, he said, nervously chuckling as even through the darkness he could hear and feel Tsu get off his bed. And it almost felt like lightning when she came up to him and whispered in his ear. We can always find a time when she's not around, her voice making his heart skip a beat as she got down into her sleeping bag. Good night, Izuku, good night, he said, struggling to keep his voice even as he slowly made his way to his bed and got underneath the covers, a single thought running over and over in his mind. Oh my God, she would. Next morning came, and with it the tense hope of silence. There were no calls from the school telling him he was expelled or a biohazard team kicking down the door for touching those blast shards. But with that silence came with the knowledge that his mother wasn't home, having already gone to her new job, no doubt. He had explained it to Tsu when she had asked, her having a similar reaction to him when he told her where exactly she was. You think she's going to be okay, she asked, a drop of worry moving amongst her words. Just like last night he didn't know, he prayed that she would be fine, and if her casual reaction to the flu maybe, there wasn't that many people who were infected, maybe. And if not to the hospital, then where? The thought blossomed and died in the time he had taken to think it. Paralyzed by his need to keep his secret and his concern for her safety, he could nothing but wait and see. For all his power, he could do nothing. "I'm gonna call Moya," he told her, also asking that she be quiet as he didn't know if he was strictly forbidden from telling anyone. Pulling out his phone, he dialed the number she had texted him with and only had to wait through 2 rings before she answered. "What is it, Midoriya?" she asked, sounding like she was in the middle of something, the sound of rustling papers and footsteps leaking through. Hi Moya," he said sheepishly, still trying to get a read on how to talk to her. "I was listening through those dead drops and I think I might have found a lead." Whatever she was doing stopped as the sound of movement ended. "What did you find?" she asked quickly, now sounding far more invested. In one of the dead drops, he talked about meeting a woman named Jane and how they met outside an abandoned warehouse. "I think they might have met up in the Warrens," he explained. Moya seemed to mull over that, the sound of light humming reaching his ear before she spoke again. "The Warrens are rather large. Was there anything in there that might narrow our search?" He said something about taking 2,000 steps once he was blindfolded. He told her, remembering the finer details. "If it took that many steps, then the warehouse would have to be pretty big. If it's that big, it should help narrow it down. Thank you for bringing this to me," she said, Midoriya happy that they were finally going to start making progress. "Oh, and Midoriya," she continued, her light tone turning to a razor's edge. "It would be best if you didn't tell anybody else about what we're doing." Izuku almost felt his heart plummet into his stomach as he heard her, turning to Tsuyu, who in the silence of the apartment had heard as well and had a similar look of shock. "I'm sorry, what?" he tried to say, a bead of sweat flowing down the back of his neck. "When I was sending you the decryption algorithm for those dead drops, I took the liberty of cloning your phone's frequency and making sure I'm always locked in with your GPS," she told him, sounding very pleased with herself. "Meaning I heard everything, Miss Moya, if I may," Tsuyu interjected, no longer seeing a reason to stay silent with the secret out. "Is there anything else you can tell us about our powers?" she said, sounding tense and anxious as she spoke. "I had a heteromorph quirk before, but when I touched the blast shards it began to disappear." "Really? Now that is interesting," Moya questioned. "But unfortunately we have gained much ground on the specifics of what exactly these powers are capable of or of its full effects," she admitted, Tsu's eyes turning downcast at the lack of answers. "But I do have a name," she continued on, their attention snapping back fully onto her voice. "Due to the extreme levels of power exhibited by those with these abilities, the boys in the lab have taken to calling these people conduits," she told them, the name settling in their minds. "Thank you, Moya," he said to her. "Don't mention it. I'll contact if I can find anything," she finished as she hung up, leaving the pair still with questions but at least with a name for what they both were. It was then he heard a ding from his phone and saw that Mineta had messaged him that he was waiting for them. The two realizing they were going to be late as they scrambled to get into their uniforms. Not wanting to waste any more time, the two conduits decided on the express elevator, jumping off the 4th floor together and landing on their feet with a loud thud. "You know, if I didn't know you two could survive that fall, I'd think you were trying to kill yourselves," he said to them, looking up to where they jumped. "God, I wish I could do that." The two didn't give him any time to ponder further as the trio raced to the train that would take them to school, just managing to get in before the doors closed. Breathing a sigh of relief, they all took a seat, letting the rolling vibration of the train's wheels relax them. "So Tsu, I never got to ask, but how are you doing with everything?" Mineta questioned, a look of concern on his features as he looked at her. "I'm doing fine for now," she told him as she began to anxiously bite her lip. "We'll see when we get to school." And Mineta, she continued, looking the short boy in the eyes. "Thanks for asking." Eventually the train stopped and the trio got off, making another, though less urgent, beeline for the school before they stopped to see a large crowd of people outside the gates. "Whoa, what do you think's going on?" Mineta questioned as they walked closer, and the answer revealed itself. The large turning out to be reporters that were currently badgering Ida and Uraraka for answers about All Might. "Should have figured," Mineta said, rolling his eyes at the media vultures. "With All Might at the school, it was only a matter of time," Tsuyu added as one of the reporters did a double take as she saw them. "Hey, it's the vigilante kid," she said as the crowd shifted its attention onto him. "Oh no," he gulped as they were swarmed by the crowd, microphones in hand, as they asked him question after question. "How is it that you were able to get into UA?" she asked. I was never formally charged," he tried to answer. "So society is so short on heroes that the rules are being bent to accept vigilantes?" another reporter questioned. No, I mean maybe, he floundered, his talk with Haruki and the seeming increase of heroes quitting making what the man said make some sense, even if he was twisting his words. How has All Might and the other teachers reacted to your attendance? On and on it went, one after another, and he could see that Mineta and Tsuyu were under similar conditions. All right, beat it you damn vultures, came a familiar voice before he suddenly felt himself lifted off the ground. Looking down quickly, he saw that it was Mina, an annoyed expression on her face as she picking up Tsu and Mineta up with her other hand. Hey, what's the big deal, the reporters whined, which fell on the deaf ears of the pink-skinned girl. Move it or get moved, she threatened as she walked forward, the threat proving more than just that as she stepped on more than a few toes and not seeming to have any strain in holding the three of them over her head. It was only when they were all safely inside did Mina set them back down onto solid ground. Thanks, he told her with a small smile. She gave the reporters one last glace before waving her hand dismissively, a half grin on her face. Don't worry, my aunt was a reporter and she taught how to deal with them. Really, who? Uraraka asked, her and Ida coming up to them after seeing what had happened, going up to Izuku in particular to see if he was okay. Well, she's not a reporter anymore, but now she's an executive director of a publishing firm, she explained, seeming to enjoy talking about her family as they were all surprised and impressed by that. Though Ida's mind was focused on something else. Be that as it may, it was still wrong of you to threaten those members of the media, he lectured, hand karate chopping the air repeatedly. It will not look for the school and not to mention using your powers illegally. Mina simply smiled like a gremlin, sticking out her tongue as she pressed the tip of her thumb to her forehead, her index finger sticking up to form an. Powers were made to be used, Ida, she told him. It would be wrong to not use them. And besides, no one got really hurt. Before Ida could argue further, a shadow fell over the group of kids as they turned around to see Aizawa and present Mike. Don't you all have class to get to? He asked expectantly as they all scrambled to leave. As they did, Izuku looked to Tsu, each giving the other a nod. Another hurdle silently passed as it seemed her father hadn't made good on his threat. Once inside, everything was allowed to return to a relative normal, until Aizawa came back with his usual tired voice. I've looked over all your combat training and your team's results, he told them as everyone waited for backhanded praise. All in all, it was decent enough for your first time, he continued as he looked over to Bakugo. It won't you any favors to sulk over your loss. Learn from it and be better, he ordered, the blonde scowling and looking away, unable to weather his gaze. And Uraraka, your plan was reckless and dangerous. It's good to want to win, but if you ever want to be a pro, you have to consider the danger you put your fellow heroes in, as well as the public, her told her, the brown-haired girl nodding her head anxiously. Good, with that out of the way, we can get to your first task, one that will decide your future, he continued, the declaration sending a chill up the spine of every student. What would it be? An other quirk test. You need to pick a class representative, he revealed, and the tension flooded out of the class as every breathed a sigh of relief. But that moment did not last long as everyone began saying they should be the ones to become class rep. In a normal school, this would never happen. No one would be fighting to do more work, but in a hero school it showed to potential agencies that the rep had the potential to lead a team, a valuable skill for any hero. Silence everyone please, Ida boomed, the order momentarily stopping all discussion. To be the class rep is to have the trust of the class to lead them. As such, the only way we can determine our leader is by a vote conveyed. Everyone immediately poking holes in such a system, telling him that everyone would simply vote for themselves. Ida, however, was adamant, stating that while most would, the one who goes more than one vote would be the most suitable candidate. Aizawa meanwhile didn't really care, saying that they just needed to pick before he woke from his nap. Election results. Izuku Midoriya 5, Momo Yaoyorozu 3, Itsuka Kendo 3, Katsuki Bakugo 2. How did I get 5 votes? Izuku questioned, though his words were frowned out by the loud accusations of Bakugo, looking around for those who voted for Izuku. What, did you really think you were going to win? Seiro asked sarcastically, earning more of the blonde's ire. But by the end and after their teacher had awoken from his nap, Izuku, Momo and Kendo made their way up to the front, each gaining their titles of class representative and co-deputies respectively. Thank you all, I promise I won't let your confidence be misplaced, he assured as he looked over the class, Ada giving him a subtle thumbs up. Next, he looked to girls on either side of him, a silent nod and calm smile shared between them. Momo, Kendo, let's do our best. Lunch. Even after so much time, Izuku had yet to be fully comfortable with being popular, or at least what he thought popular people dealt with. He was in the middle of a large table with Mineta, Tsu, Iida, Mina, Hagakure, Shiozaki, Kirishima, and even Momo, who was sitting at the far end. He was happy though that Hagakure had taken his offer. He knew well the sadness of being invisible, though never quite so literally. The table was practically buzzing the energy as Uraraka was gushing over how good the food tasted. Mina and Hagakure talking about their Aizawa's rather thorny attitude, and even Mineta was talking with Shiozaki, the small boy, listening about some Christian rock band she liked. Eventually, he though was brought to the fore of Uraraka's conversation as it shifted to talking about his election. "I still can't believe you got so many votes, Midoriya," she praised, big puffy cheeks still half filled with rice. "I mean, who else was it going to be?" Kirishima stated like it was obvious. With Asui and Mineta, he was sure to get at least 3 votes. Izuku smiled at that. Though he knew his friends trusted him, it was still nice to hear, though he hadn't been entirely right. "I didn't vote for myself though," he admitted, everyone looking at him. "Then who?" Mina asked, hand on her chin. "I voted for Momo," he admitted. The raven-haired girl who had until this point stayed rather aloof snapped to look at him. "Why?" she questioned, tilting her head in confusion. "Because I knew you would do great," he told her, the tall girl's face growing red at the compliment before looking confused again as he continued. "Because you called me out. When pretty much everyone else was just happy I survived or was praising my power, you were the first to call me out on my shortcomings and how I could improve. It was something I needed to hear, so thank you for telling me." "Oh, well, you're welcome, Izuku," she stammered, her face growing a slightly deeper shade of crimson as a soft smile spread across her face. "Oh, Izuku, I never realized you were such a ladies' man." She ties eyeing Mom's reaction as Tsu nudged him with her knee and gave him a glare. But before he could defend himself, the blare of an alarm rang through the halls, everyone stopping and looking around in confusion. "Alert, Level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate the premises in an orderly fashion," a robotic voice announced as everyone began to scramble out of their seats and rush for the exits. But so many trying to leave all at once created nothing but a gridlock of people pushing and shoving to get past. And Izuku found himself in the middle of it, his conduit strength at least keeping him from being pushed down and trampled in the stampede. "This is bad good," Mineta said, the shorter boy clutching onto him to keep from being swept up in the living tide of students. Neither knew what a Level 3 security breach was, but to warrant the entire school to evacuate it must have been bad. Bad enough that Izuku willing to let out a radar pulse. He needed to know what was going on. Letting it loose, he focused his mind on all the electrical signals he could find, the students around him, the cables in the walls, and finally the reporters and their equipment that were now in the school. "It's the media," he said, Mineta looking up at him even as the rest of the crowd ignored him, too focused on trying to escape. Damn it, he needed to get everyone to listen, but how to get their attention? The answer came when he saw Mina, who was having even less trouble with being carried by the crowd. A veritable pink boulder in a river, refusing to move as the water broke against her. "Mina," he called, the black-eyed looking over to him immediately. "Let me get on you," he cried as he looked over to Tsu and then to Mineta, who already knew where this was going. "Tsu catch," he said as without arguing he lifted and threw Mineta through the air, the small boy screaming as Tsu caught him. Now was his turn as he maneuvered closer to Mina, who held out her arm and allowed him to climb and stand on like a platform. "Everyone stop," he demanded, screaming loudly and firing 2 blasts of electricity into the ceiling, dust and smoldering plaster raining down on him. "It's just the reporters, there are no villains. Everyone calm down, we cannot allow ourselves to panic. Let those in front get so we can get out without trampling each other," he ordered as he looked down on the now silent crowd. Eventually, his demands were met as those in the back ceased to keep pushing, allowing those in the front get out, and soon everyone had gotten out of the cafeteria. "Thanks gain, Mina," he sighed, relieved that no one had gotten hurt as she patted down her sleeve and hair get any last bits of dust out. "No problem, besides that was some quick thinking," she complimented as Tsuyu and Mineta came up. "Don't you ever throw me like that again," he swore as he pointed a finger at him. "I thought I was going to die, sorry," he told him, raising his hands in surrender even as he tried to suppress a smile. "Whatever, let's just get back to class," he relented, shoulders slacking as they followed his example. "You're so lucky you're my friend," but as they exited the cafeteria, they were stopped one last time as the crosshair eyes of a pink-haired girl zoomed into Izuku's vision. The girl was wearing dirty, oil-stained overalls and had more bags under her eyes than she probably had years in her life. "Hey, you're the electric kid, right? Thought so because I saw you shoot that lightning," she blurted out quickly, Izuku needing a second to compose himself before answering. Yeah, he said slowly as before the girl cut him off. Well, I am Mei Hatsume from the support course, and I have a proposition for you, she announced, point a thumb at herself and sounding like a used car salesman. I saw you battle with that explosion kid, and I knew I had to talk to you. Wait, how did you see our battle training? Tsuyu questioned, giving the new girl a cautious look. The business students are given recordings of the hero course's battles, gives them experience running PR and media stories for heroes when they graduate, and you know how much they love to talk. She answered, with a smile, not noticing the irony of that last statement. Well, what's the proposition? Izuku asked, careful of what exactly he was getting himself into. I saw that your costume got really messed up in that fight, and I was hoping I could fix it up, maybe use some of my babies to make it even better and even make you something new, she said, extending her hand like the deal had already been settled. And what do you get out of it? He asked, knowing that there was always a catch. Well, seeing as how you're already kind of famous, you know how you fought those Reaper guys. And with your flashy quirk, if any support companies saw that you were using my gear, it would be free advertising for you, Mineta finished, as her girl snapped her fingers to show that he was right. So how's about it? I fix up your stuff, maybe make you something new, and in return you point any people asking about your gear my way, she said with a smile, shaking her hand like it would make it any more enticing. Thinking about it, he couldn't really see a downside to it. Because his mother had been the one to give him his costume, he didn't have any contracts with a support company to fix it. And besides, if she was confident enough in her babies, then they must be good. Okay, you have a deal, he said, grabbing her hand as her smile grew almost manic. Yes, you won't be disappointed. Just grab your old costume and bring it down to the support wing. I'll make it better than it ever was, partner, she declared, pumping her fist into the air before speeding off back down the hallway. Are you sure that was a good idea? Asked Mineta, seeming to have gotten over that whole throwing business. Izuku shrugged his shoulders. What's the worst that could happen? Later, Mineta was walking with Tsuyu and Midoriya, the halls emptying as students left for the day. Though even in the emptiness, the sound of drills and power tools grew louder and louder as they entered into the support wing. In his pocket, he held something special, something he'd like Izuku with later, and who the encounter Hatsume had created the opportunity. Izuku, for his part, was carrying his ruined costume in his arms, the green jumpsuit barely holding itself together. Now which room would it be? Izuku said out loud as they passed door after door. Probably the one with the noise, Tsuyu suggested sarcastically. Sure enough, the noise of work reached a fever pitch as the three stood outside the door, Izuku only a few inches away from tapping it before a massive explosion sent the three of them sprawling across the ground. Mineta coughed the smoke out of his lungs, the faint ting of metal falling to the floor, and what he assumed was a teacher yelling at someone filled his ringing ears as he looked over and nearly felt his jaw hit the floor a second time. Between him and Tsu was Midoriya, flat on his back, but on top of him was that Hatsume girl with her nice C-cup breasts pressing into his chest, and from the shocked expression on Izuku's face, he was getting more than an eye full. Hey partner, glad to see you made it, the girl said with a smile, completely oblivious to the explosion and what Izuku had seen as she peeled herself of him. And if Tsuyu didn't like Hatsume before, she certainly didn't like her now as she stared daggers into the girl. Hatsume, what did I tell you about blowing up the studio? Came the annoyed voice of Power Loader, the teacher wearing an excavator bucket on his head. You blow it up one more time and you're out for a week. Sorry, Mr. Loader, she said, smiling only long enough for him to turn away before it fell, and she looked back at his friend. Come on in, he's only half serious, she told them as they walked into the shop that nearly the size of a basketball court. Now then, let me see what I'm working with, she continued, opening her hands as Izuku gave her his costume. She hemmed and hawed, looking over it again and again until she nodded her head with a wicked grin. Oh yes, I can work with this. I'll get this back to you in a few days. Thank you, Mei, he told her, bowing slightly as he and Tsuyu made to leave before noting him staying in place. You coming, Eita? Yeah, just give me a minute. I want to see if I can get any new gadgets from her, he lied as his accepted and walked away. So you're interested in my babies too, she said, perking up like a cat who found a mouse. Not right now, but I think I have a baby you might be interested in, he told her as he pulled the paper out of his pocket and showed it to her. You think you can make it? Who do you think you're talking to? Of course I can make it, she said as she practically licked her lips at the design. But right now there's the issue of patents, he repeated, cocking his head to the side in confusion. Any new designs we make in the support course are patented under the creator. But seeing as you gave me the idea, I think a 70-30 split in my favor sounds fair, she offered, reaching out her hand again. 60-40 he returned, this was or his friend, but he wasn't about let a money source slip through his fingers. 65-35, 62-38, deal, the two then shook hands. Pleasure doing business with you. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.